Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our LA Marketo Engage webinar today. We've been looking forward to this and hope to have more of these events together to discuss topics that affect this community's work, project, and growth. So we're excited to kick it off. Our topic today is Beyond Compliance, how email accessibility boosts engagement, conversions, and brand trust. I'll be presenting today with Jen Watford, and we'll be discussing a topic we hear a lot about, email accessibility compliance, and really getting into some of the finer points of why it matters, how to achieve it, and the risks of ignoring it. In our agenda, we'll dive deeper into email marketing compliance to ensure every email you send aligns with the legal requirements, optimizes user experiences, and enhances the trustworthiness of your brand. And we'll cover the following topics: navigating email compliance, relevant accessibility statistics, best practices for email accessibility, the hidden costs of accessibility in emails, before a couple of those last ones, we'll dive into the whole evolution of accessibility and current laws. How did this all come about? And since I'm starting out, I'll share a bit about me. I have many years of account management experience in consulting services, so mainly in the internet and marketing automation spaces. For the past 10 years, I've worked with Marina Decisions, which is a full service marketing operations company. And here I focus on building strong client partnerships and growing our teams of dedicated marketing ops experts. I love what I do, and I'm always focused on how we as a team and company can provide the best experience possible to all of our clients. This includes how we operate with our daily project management processes and how we best support our clients as trusted consultants. Applying our expertise across marketing automation, data strategy, all marketing ops, to bring the highest value to every project. A big part of what we've always done, essentially our bread and butter, is ensuring flawless email marketing. With that includes email accessibility compliance. So it seemed like a perfect topic for us to connect on today and to get started. So for effectively navigating email accessibility compliance, we want to reiterate how email is one of the most personalized and direct modes of communication that you have as a company between the brand and your customer. For small businesses nurturing their first loyal customers, medium-sized enterprises are scaling their outreach, or large corporation looking to retain their expansive customer base, email marketing is a crucial tool. However, while the power of email is immense, so is the responsibility, especially of ensuring compliance, and that responsibility cannot be overstated. If you use email marketing and platforms like Marketo Engage to foster deeper connections with customers, you must focus on email compliance. With an increasing focus on the data privacy and consent, along with email compliance, it's a necessary part of any email marketing strategy. Non-compliance can ruin a brand's image, lead to fines, and diminish customer engagement. So let's check into a little bit more about why compliance is important. Web accessibility ensures a seamless experience for all visitors, just as email accessibility does as well, regardless of the disability. So prioritizing accessible content is not only the right thing to do, it can also reduce costs and bring benefits for businesses. To demonstrate the importance of the online accessibility conformity, we've compiled some statistics showing how many different people are affected, who they are, what's the economic impact for businesses, and how they can get better. Let's take a look at that. So here, if you see a snapshot of who's affected by disabilities, we see that there's 1.3 billion people globally affected by disabilities. That's 1 in 6. If we take a look at children affected with disabilities worldwide, that's 1 in 10. And 600 million people are affected by hearing loss in particular globally. And for those who need assistive technology, from data in 2021, that reached 1 billion people. So if we take a look at this slide in particular, as we touch on the hearing loss topic, we see that 5.6% of people worldwide suffer from a hearing loss, and it's expected to grow to 7.3% by 2050. And we're looking at those numbers growing and growing. Tied to that, about 92% of people with disabilities use a mobile screen reader. And according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, we'll call WCAG, there's 4 key principles that are evolved to ensure content accessibility. So all the rules they put in place, all the guidelines they put in place come from these 4 pillars or principles that they call them. And one is to make things perceivable. Need to make the content accessible to website users with visual impairments, and email users, visual impairments, color, blindness, and hearing loss. The other is to make your resources operable, to ensure navigation and everything's accessible via keyboard or any other input methods, not just a mouse. Third is to make your assets understandable. So providing clear, predictable, and straightforward content to support users with cognitive and sensory impairments, such as those with dyslexia. And the fourth is to make assets robust. So you're ensuring the content is compatible with current and future technologies, including screen readers and assistive devices. We can find all requirements and guidelines in detail on the website that I've provided a link to here. So if you're curious, take note of that. You can just start with the www.w3.org and find your way through a lot of these details. Next slide. Now I wanted to review just quickly, I'll just scroll through these slides, some of the disabilities which can benefit from email accessibility standards. So there's temporary impairments. This involves a wide range like a broken arm, missing glasses, slow internet speeds, something that's temporary. And so just one they mentioned there. Next slide. There's speech impairments, includes people who are unable to produce speech, recognized by others or by software. So that's important to include options in your email to get in touch with things beyond a phone call, like a contact form, live chat box, or reply to email address. Next slide. Neurological conditions include people with conditions that affect the central and peripheral nervous system. And so you want to make sure your email is easy to navigate, break up text into smaller sections, avoid precise actions that be difficult for someone with tremors or who's using a mouth stick. Next slide. Physical limitations that might include people who have weaknesses or limitations of motor control. So your emails should be easily accessed with keyboard navigation and screen readers. Next slide. Auditory impairments. Auditory disabilities include those who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so in your emails, consider things like the video captions, transcripts for anything that you're referencing. Next slide. Cognitive issues, people with mental limitations that affect memory, problem solving, attention, or comprehension. So when building emails, use a simple layout and presentation, avoid technical language, include clear instructions, and steer clear of distracting animation. Next slide. And visual impairments. Visual disabilities go far beyond blindness or low vision. They can also include color blindness, or people have sensitivities to brightness, cataracts, glaucoma. So example is someone with astigmatism can make it hard to read emails in dark mode. So there's a lot of considerations there. And I know Jen's going to talk about a lot of the things we will put in place later that help with some of these sensitivities. Next slide. So just throwing in a personal picture here. I'm in the middle, and on my right, as I'm standing, left as viewing, is my mom, and on the other side is my daughter. But I just wanted to share a bit about my mom, who I'm super proud of. Her name's Ruth Cook, and she was a pioneer in special education in the early 80s in California, starting some of the first early intervention programs in the United States. So these programs recognize the importance of identifying disabilities as early as possible in children, and getting them the proper resources to enhance their experiences and optimize their development. So she was the director of special education and professor at Santa Clara University and taught hundreds of future special education teachers and raised millions of dollars in grants for their programs. So super expert in her field and really went a long way and wrote textbooks. I put a snapshot of one of them there. The publishers, it's in its 10th edition and they want her to do a new edition. But that sounds really challenging to her, especially given her situation. So my mom's foundation in disability training came full circle when 3 years ago she was declared legally blind. It came on quickly from macular degeneration and has been a challenge she's been working through. So how she experiences the world changed drastically, and seeing her navigate this challenge has increased my awareness into many aspects of accessibility and its importance in the online and digital world. So usually this online experience is less visible outside the world and takes place behind closed doors, but it's just as important as that ramp that you see or the elevator option at the store or the repeating voice cue at the crosswalk or the sign language interpreter you see at the news conference. So all those years that my mom did the handwritten notes on the holiday cards that I took for granted, now my dad is in charge of doing. And this avid reader and writer now feels more limited in her world a lot because she's of a generation born without a device in their hand. So there's the age and exposure to computers and limitations there, plus everything else, the disabilities. So yeah, thank goodness for audiobooks. But I just wanted to share this because we need to make the world an easier place to navigate and experience for people with challenges. My mom now started a group at a retirement community advocating for people with macular degeneration. She's implemented changes around the neighborhood, like clearly marking the edges of the sidewalks, putting in sensor gates that raise and lower for cars when they're approaching so that, you know, people can't unexpectedly be in the way of someone coming in quickly. Improving signage around the complex with larger letters and stuff there. So making the most of it. She always says she's really lucky, and if this is her main challenge to deal with, it could be worse. So yeah, I don't know if I could be so positive. But we're going to talk a lot about the business and legal aspect of accessibility compliance today. So I didn't want to lose perspective on the personal and human aspect, because disabilities touch or will touch the lives of our loved ones or ourselves at some point in time. And it can change, having that can change how we feel in the world, how we interact with the things we need or love, and how we feel about ourselves. So making online experiences more accessible, really in the true form of the word, plays a huge part in that human connection. Next slide. So there's been an evolution of email accessibility. So creating accessible emails is critical to avoid some discrimination against the disability community, to comply with the ADA, which is the American with Disabilities Act. So just to give a little background, so you set the foundation of why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important. We mentioned the human aspect. There's also a legal aspect. So the Americans with Disability Act exists to make sure there's no discrimination against people with disabilities. It was enacted in 1990, and it's the most important American law regarding civil rights and accessibility for people with disabilities. So there's two goals of the ADA: ensuring employers provide employees with disabilities with the necessary accommodations to do their job, and ensuring businesses make it possible for people with disabilities to properly access their products and services. So you may ask yourself, do emails need to be ADA compliant? And it's thought a common consensus has emerged that ADA applies to the online world as well, and that's why new regulations have been put in place in the last several years. And today, courts in the U.S. apply the ADA to businesses' emails and other online communications. So basically, if your business needs to be ADA compliant, this means that the emails sent by your business also need to be compliant. So even though the ADA is interpreted to include online domain, there's a lack of clear technical guidelines and requirements for this. So standards that apply to web accessibility shed light on what is expected of business owners in terms of email accessibility. So you'll hear sometimes, and I've already been saying websites or email or resources, and it's because a lot of what's expected from emails has stemmed from what's expected from web accessibility. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, those are the standards that website owners referred to by U.S. courts in cases involving ADA compliance violations. So that's why we'll use the WCAG terminology sometimes. It's created by the World Wide Web Consortium, and those are where you get the most resources. That was the link I provided before for the up-to-date version of the standard. So you'll hear it relates to the web, but that is guiding our email accessibility regulations. So next slide. And I'll go over this quickly because I know it's just a lot of history, but it really helps to kind of connect where it comes from and things to consider. So looking at this slide, you can see we're not just looking at Americans Disability Act. We also have the European Accessibility Act. And even though enforcement currently lacks legal penalties there, this on June 28th, which is literally 2 months from today in 2025, people with disabilities and impairments will be permitted to file lawsuits in the EU against companies who websites and emails have accessibility issues. And so that's important for us all to consider. There's also the Accessible Canada Act, and there's also the Equality Act 2010 in the UK. So just noting, if your company in brand operates globally, you need to make sure each country's accessibility laws are followed to ensure compliance. Most of these also align with the WCAG. So if you're following that and those rules, you're probably in compliance with those other countries and rules. Next slide. So what happens when you're not compliant? We have heard of some stories. We hear of people in the news. We're seeing it, and we don't want that to be us. And so that's why we want to emphasize the importance of that today. So Nike, Harvard, Amazon, Lego, Walmart, Netflix, Domino's Pizza, Target, they've all faced lawsuits for insufficient digital accessibility and violating the WCAG in the recent years. So in 2023 alone, several companies paid over $100 million in settlements, really signaling that online accessibility is no longer just best practice, it's really a legal obligation. And we know emails are an essential resource for communication, media, commerce, and services. So with millions of businesses operating online and so many individuals with disability being such a big segment of the population, this exposes businesses to potential lawsuits. So to better understand, here's some statistics just noted here. Can just look over a couple of those to keep in mind. So in 2023, over 4,000 lawsuits filed for digital accessibility violations. 97% targeted websites. 77 were filed against organizations with annual revenue under $25 million. So it's not only the large enterprises, getting addressed for risks. 97% went settled before trial, and most of them averaged around $100,000 of a violation. So noted some ranges there for violations. And just noting, 99.97% of emails have accessibility issues. So that's a critical area that a lot of people are currently overlooking. So we think of this as an obvious topic. We think of this as something that people are knowing and looking into, but this is a gigantic percentage of emails that are still, that most emails out there still have some sort of infraction or issue that wouldn't really be meeting standards for accessibility. Next slide. Just a quick snapshot of where the common accessibility failures sit. Looking at the top one being the orange, that's the low contrast text. And then as we move down, we see missing alt text, we see empty links, we see missing form input labels, empty buttons, missing document language. And next slide, because we'll chat a little bit more. So some of the common digital accessibility issues that have led to lawsuits, and just providing some real examples, are missing alt text, that's and alt that enables screen readers to describe images for visually impaired users. Domino's Pizza, Walmart, and Amazon were sued for omitting alt text on their sites. Next is improper link labeling, and I know I'm not going to describe what all these are, because I know Jen will get into details on how to set this up and what these things are in terms of being able to cover those for your accessibility compliance. But in terms of the legal aspect, improper link labeling, Walmart faced legal action over vague link descriptions with missing video captions. Netflix was sued for lacking captions. Missing audio subtitles. Harvard settled a lawsuit over $1.5 million for missing captions. So just some examples here. With poor color contrast, at the end there, Nike was sued over that and the contrast affecting the readability for its users. Next slide. So at Marina Decisions and how we're working here. You can jump to the next slide. I think that reiterates that over 4,000 cases. And we'll jump again. And so, yeah, at Marina Decisions, we're supporting SMB clients, the enterprise clients. Everybody, as you see, needs the support there. We have full service marketing operations and marketing automation needs. With that support comes this inherent trust in us, and as expert consultants, that we're ensuring that user experiences are optimized and we're protecting our clients from any potential compliance issues. And all along, we're helping clients unlock tangible business results. So the responsibility that we have has involved being at the forefront of the compliance regulations and ensuring that we can meet the timelines if new things are rolled out and taking effect as they have over the past several years. So a few years ago, with a new sort of hovering timeline and deadline on making sure there's compliance met, we engaged with a large enterprise company, brought us in quickly to convert almost 3,000 emails within a couple months to be fully converted, tested, and launched to meet email accessibility compliance. It was by the end of that year deadlines, and we completed that. It was thorough, completed on time. It was all hands on deck, and we've been supporting this client with flawless email marketing campaigns ever since. Because that was a really huge project to kind of come through on, but it shows how important that deadline was and that compliance was to a company that didn't want to stand out, didn't want to not be doing things correctly, but also didn't want to suffer any lawsuits or be in the news in a negative way if it wasn't done. So we realized the criticality of that deadline and made sure we got everything done in time. But through that process and with other clients, we've developed a robust accessibility checklist and process to ensure compliance. And we'll be sharing that at the end of the presentation as well. So the other ways to make sure that you have something in place that takes that responsibility seriously is ensuring your team's trained and invested in the value of the user experience, so beyond that legal compliance. And then make sure you have that detailed checklist and make sure you're conducting regular audits of emails to identify and address potential issues. And make sure you also have established process for thorough implementation, testing, and staying current in case there's any changes, making sure you're going to that site, checking for anything that's been added to that checklist for accessibility compliance. But basically, as we mentioned earlier, if you're meeting that WCAG guidelines and requirements, then it's probably safe to say your content's optimized for accessibility. And next slide. Just taking a really quick look at the real benefits of accessibility in action. And Jen's also going to touch more on this because there's a lot of ROI that comes out of this, making sure that you're compliant. And you're going to see higher engagement. And there's examples here that sort of show how that has come through for other companies. You're going to see brand loyalty, and you're going to see inclusive conversions, sometimes doubling your conversion rates. And I think that's kind of from me. Next slide, because now we're going to transition, and I'm going to take time to share over to Jen Watford, who's going to get into some more practical implementation details, further explore how accessibility compliance serves not only as another cost, but as an investment and that measurable ROI that we're looking for. So Jen, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate it. Really excited to be here. Really excited to kind of talk to you guys about email accessibility today. I'll probably go into more on the nuts and bolts of email accessibility and what you need to do to make sure you're compliant. So a little bit of background on me. So for over 20 years, lived and breathed marketing. I built my career on kind of, really the energy around creative strategy and a passion for tangible results. And as a director of technical solutions here at Marina, I now leverage that unique blend of experience to bridge that gap between marketing vision and technological execution. So my focus is really on empowering teams to optimize certain workflows, harness the power of the data that they do have available to them, and then ultimately deliver exceptional customer experiences. So this experience has been pivotal in my ability to master email accessibility, ensuring that all audience can engage with content effectively, and my technical knowledge allows me to see the back end while the marketing side of my experience prioritizes the user experience. So it's like that perfect blend. So excited to kind of talk about the kind of email accessibility best practices today, as well as the hidden cost of inaccessible emails. So building accessible emails. Are we reaching every subscriber? So as marketers, we're passionate about connecting with our audience, but what if we're only reaching half of our potential audience because we are not email accessibility compliant? So today we'll delve into the world of email accessibility, specifically tailored to you guys, and we'll uncover those hidden costs of exclusions and equip you with the knowledge that you need to truly create inclusive and impactful email campaigns. Next slide. So where do we begin? Let's begin with best practices. So again, we're, decades ago, the online world was just starting to get started. So email accessibility was never top of mind for most people, but now we're inclusively in this digital world, and it's no longer a nice to have, as Kim kind of talked over those compliancies, and it's not kind of like, oh, hey, you should have email accessibility. It is now you need to have email accessibility or you're going to get violations. So what we're going to kind of go over today is kind of giving you the knowledge you need and the tools to create those email campaigns and make sure that you're covering everything. And so by understanding and implementing these best practices that we'll go over, you will be able to expand your reach, enhance the user experience for your customers, and ultimately maximize the impact of your marketing efforts. So to begin, best practices. First one, clear and logical structure. You're going to want to make sure that in Marketo, you're using the HTML editor to implement proper heading tags. You want to make sure that you are also maintaining a logical heading hierarchy. So make sure all of your heading tags are in place and they're properly coded to make sure that they're shown as H1 or H2 tags in your code. Also utilize Marketo's list formatting in the HTML editor. So again, use the bulleted or numbered list. This provides a clear content structure. So instead of just listing things off by themselves or using dashes, use the bullets, use the numbering to help with that. Tables. A lot of times in our emails, we use tables. So it's really, really important that you're using them correctly, that you're ensuring you have proper headers on your table tags. as well as if you're going to be using a table for a layout, you're going to want to assign that user role of presentation. So you're going to want to make sure that you're adding that into your tags. And then, of course, you're going to want to avoid those complex table layouts that can confuse the screen readers as they go through this. Next slide. Readable text. So really, really important is your font size. So you want to use sufficiently large font sizes. So I would say at least 14 pixels. You're ideally going to want to choose a sans serif font just because it has a better readability. And that will help you with your accessibility. And then with Marketo, because it allows for that font styling, make sure you're using that and always keeping email accessibility in mind when you're going through that font styling. Color contrast, Kim kind of touched on this earlier. It's really important, and a lot of people don't think about it. You want to make sure that your high contrast ratio between text and background colors is sufficient for accessibility. You'll want to use contrast tracking tools like WebAIMS Contrast Checker to verify the compliance. Also, we talk about our email accessibility checklist that we'll kind of touch on again at the end of this webinar. In there, we kind of give you a little bit of insight into that color contrast and what you should be looking for and things like that. You'll also want to be very, very mindful of color usage. So a lot of times people want to come with these really bright, bold colors that kind of like jump out at you. And it kind of goes against the email accessibility. So you don't want color alone to be the way that you're conveying all the critical information within your email. And kind of important, and I've seen a lot of places where we don't necessarily think about this, but avoid the justified text. So left aligned text is generally easier to read. Obviously, right aligned text is not. We don't usually go from the right. And centered text is, I've seen it a lot. Sometimes it makes sense, but ideally you always want to go with that left aligned. Next slide. Images. So again, just going to kind of talk a point on this. Kim mentioned a lot of the different kind of violations that came across. Most of them were around alt text. Alt text is really important. Again, that's how people kind of read what the content is about or what you're doing on your site. So you want to provide descriptive alt text for all images. You don't want to just put an alt tag of image. You need to explain what that image is and what it's conveying. So Marketo does give you the ability to add these alt text images or alt text for all your images. Make sure you are utilizing that. Marketo makes it very, very simple for you to do it. So definitely as you go through your emails, you should be checking all of your alt text. Your alt text should convey the image's purpose and content. So again, don't just put an alt text of, man. Like if it's a picture of a man or something like that, make sure you're putting the purpose and the content that, again, that you're trying to convey within your email. Link accessibility. So again, it's kind of a little similar to the alt text. You do get to add some descriptive link text to your links. So you should be doing that as well. So avoid the generic phrases like click here. Put that content. What is it? Use link text that clearly describes the destination of where you're asking that person to click to. So again, imagine that they can't see visually what's on your email. You need to put in that link text something so they understand if I click here, this is where I'm going to go. And this is what it's for. And then of course, sufficient clickable area. So again, make sure your buttons are large enough, because a lot of times, yes, you're looking for people when they use it on a browser or on a desktop or something like that. But you also need to be considerate of if someone is using it on a mobile phone. Email accessibility spans across everything, like all of your online tools that you're using to push content to users. Next slide. So let's get into Marketo specific considerations. So when you're building out your templates in Marketo, you want to ensure that they adhere to the accessibility guidelines. Test the templates thoroughly with screen readers. Marketo provides plain text versions on all the emails as you create them. Use them. Please do not think of them as a secondary option to your HTML email. They are meant to be used in conjunction with your HTML email. So ensure that you're using the plain text versions. They're accurate. They reflect the email's content. All the links are there. All of that good stuff. The nice thing about Marketo is it kind of gives you the starting point, and it basically takes your HTML email and puts it into a plain text version. And then really you're just going through there and sprucing it up and making it look good. Testing, test. I can't say this enough. It's very, very important. You can go through and you can add your alt text and you can get your links, your link context in there, all of that good stuff. And there'll always be something where you're like, oh, I missed that alt text, or I missed that one image or that link. So test. Use Marketo's testing features to preview emails across various devices and email clients. So you can kind of see what it's going to look in different things, because obviously what it looks on a desktop is very different from how it looks on a mobile device, or necessarily how it looks in Outlook looks a little bit different than how it looks in Gmail. So definitely use that to do testing across all of your emails. Also consider using third-party email testing tools like Litmus for the accessibility checks. So just using Marketo's testing features isn't enough. You need to take that further step and use that third party that you can kind of go out and conclude those testing with accessibility checks. Litmus is a good one. We ourselves use Litmus in a lot of things that we do. So I really encourage you guys to, make sure that you're using one of those third-party tools to complete that accessibility checks. And then also, one thing that is always kind of left off a lot of the times, and people don't always do, but it's really important, is test with an actual screen reader software. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's really, really important for you, if you're able to test with an actual screen reader software, you're gonna find a lot of things that don't make sense that you can then go back and change and really make sure that you're compliant in accessibility. Next screen. Content considerations. So overall, you just want to make sure that you have clear and concise language. Kim touched on this before. You want to avoid the jargon. Use simple language. Keep sentences and paragraphs short. On your subject lines and pre-headers, you're going to want to write clear, descriptive subject lines, pre-header text. Really, really important for the screen reader user. So they really use that pre-header text to kind of let them know what the email is about. And like I mentioned through all of this, there's a lot of third-party tools out there that you can use to help you make sure that you stay compliant. We've mentioned WebAIM's contrast tracker. So this kind of helps you to ensure that you have sufficient color contrast. That's the tool that will help you do that. Then we have screen reader software like NVDA. It's a free software. so you don't have to pay for it, or voiceover, which is more kind of geared towards the Apple products. But both of those will allow you to kind of use it as a screen reader software. You'll be able to apply that to your emails and see where you need to make those updates and those changes to be compliant. And again, as mentioned, Litmus for just a comprehensive email testing, including accessibility checks. I can't say enough about it. It's very, very helpful. Like I said, we use it ourselves on the thousands of emails that we do monthly for customers. Next slide. So now that we've gotten over kind of like the best practices for email accessibility, I want to touch a little bit on the hidden cost of having emails that are not email accessible. So the cost of inaccessible emails extends far beyond simply just being inconsiderate. It translates into tangible financial and reputational losses for businesses. So let's talk about what those hidden costs are. So probably the big one, the one that affects people's wallet, lost revenue and market share. So when you exclude a significant audience. So if you could have an audience of 1 million subscribers to your emails. But if 30% of that are being excluded because you're not email accessible, like see how much that is going to affect the ROI of your email campaigns. So you when you're excluding that audience, so the people with disabilities, they represent a substantial portion of that population. Kim went over those details, those numbers. They were huge numbers. So that is something that you want to make sure. By neglecting that accessibility, businesses efficiently shut out a large potential customer base, really affecting that ROI. Again, this translates lost sales, reduced engagement, and a smaller market share because your competitor may be email accessible. And so they are going to grab that audience that you're not serving. Another thing is damaged brand reputation. Again, maybe something that you can't super see really clearly because it doesn't affect the wallet. But it does in a sense. It all comes back to the same thing. So, and again, in today's socially conscious environment, consumers increasingly prioritize inclusivity. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. Inaccessible emails can lead to negative perceptions of a brand, damaging the reputation, eroding the customer trust. And then obviously the one thing that we never want to do, negative word of mouth on social media backlash. It's huge. It can amplify all of these effects. It can amplify people even trusting you or trying out your business for the first time. Next slide. Legal and financial risks. So I won't spend too much time on this because Kim really went in deep with the legal and financial risks. But as Kim mentioned, increased litigation. So accessibility lawsuits are on the rise, particularly concerning digital content. So a lot of times people think it's not online, but it is. They look at it closely, and it's not just the big guys that are being gone after for lawsuits. It's also the little guys. So we all really have to make an effort to be compliant. Remediation expenses. Again, a lot of these times you get a lawsuit against you. As a company, they're really hard to win if you just weren't compliant. So a lot of companies try to remediate the situation. They have to pay for those fees. They have to pay for all of that. And so, and then a lot of times you have to then go back and you have to fix everything. So the time and the money you have to spend to go through all of your emails to now redo all of those templates to make them compliant. It's just ideal to do it from the start instead of having to go back and kind of do all of that. And then reduce productivity and efficiency. So increase support costs. So inaccessible emails can generate a higher volume of support requests. So again, you're going to get people calling you, how come I can't do this? Or what about this? Or, you will always have someone point out what you did wrong. Um, Very few people call you and be like, oh my God, that was a beautiful email you sent me. Most people call to be like, hey, my alt tags were missing, or you forgot a period, or you bolded that and you shouldn't have. So there is increased support costs when you are not accessibility compliant. And then missed opportunities. The emails that are not accessible can lead to lower click-through rates and conversion rates, resulting in missed opportunities for the ROI of your email campaign. Next slide. Intangible costs. So again, let's focus a little bit on the stuff that doesn't necessarily hit the wallet. Employee morale. I know a lot of people don't necessarily know, hey, like, is this really can employee morale be affected by inaccessible emails? It can, because when organizations disregard accessibility, it can create a sense of exclusion and diminish employee morale, particularly around people with disabilities. So if you have somebody with disabilities working at your company and they see that this is not an important topic for you, that's really hard for them to kind of like have that loyalty to the company and support that company. So it does kind of affect that employee morale. And then loss of goodwill, again, with the general public. People talk. They're going to say, oh, this company doesn't care about disabilities, and maybe you do care, but you're not compliant, and so that you need to make it a priority. And so it's really, really real around the general public, and it will get out. So in essence, inaccessible emails create a barrier that prevents a significant portion of the population from fully engaging within your company or your business. Next slide.
Okay, I guess we're at the Q&A. Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I learned a lot on the implementation side, but I also really like your points kind of about the legal aspect. I know I covered it, you covered it, but it made me think of something while you were saying it, that to emphasize, we know, unfortunately, kind of how the world operates a little bit. And now that there are rules in place, there are people that are going to look for companies, probably especially the larger ones, but look for companies who are breaking the rules. So there are lawyers out there who are going to benefit from this and find people that need it to be a certain way. And if you're not in compliance, you're targeted. On the flip side, if you are somebody with a disability, I think the people with disabilities are looking for the people doing it right. Like they're looking and they're responding to, but they're also valuing that. They want to encourage that. So they'll frequent those places or go to those sites or give positive feedback on that company because of those emails. So I think you may benefit from both if you're compliant, because you won't be the target, someone looking for you doing it wrong, but you will be appreciated, and somehow that will come back full circle, I think, if you're doing it right. So I just sort of had that thought while you were reviewing that legal slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, we're on the Q&A section. A couple questions came in, but I forgot to say at the beginning that if you have some, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. But since it's right there, I think a few people thought of that. So Jen, I kind of wanted to direct the first one to you, and we'll just spend a few minutes here before we close out. Because I also was intrigued when you were saying, we use Litmus, we use this, but you recommend using something other than Marketo. So I'm curious about that. So one question that came in, maybe even before you said that, was how does Marketo handle accessibility testing in their platform? So I am curious your response on that, as well as kind of maybe referencing what you said about how it's maybe not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So while Marketo doesn't have a built-in accessibility testing, Emails created with Marketo can be tested using external tools. And that's why I kind of like really kind of talked about using those third-party tools. Marketers can export or preview email HTML from Marketo and then run checks through tools like Email on Acid, Litmus, or Wave, which is the web accessibility evaluation tool. So Marketo doesn't necessarily have that accessibility testing within the platform, but they do make it easy for you to grab it, export it, put it out, and use those third-party tools to complete that testing.
Nice. That makes sense. Cool. Thanks. Let me see. Actually, I think we already covered this one, so it might have come in before you went over it. But I'll take it because I had a thought when you were talking about it. Someone said, I'm not always in charge of the actual content of my emails, and I get it from my stakeholders. Are there suggestions I can give on content that can help emails be more accessible to people? So this is the content perspective. I know you touched on it, Jen, talking about kind of the structure of the sentences and the paragraphs and the content a bit and not the jargon. So just trying to think along those lines. We definitely want to make it accessible for everybody. So I think you covered that already pretty well. I was just going to add using that active voice or clear language, also the free of jargon point, makes it better for everyone. That's just sort of straightforward. But they do say, depending on your target audience, and I remember kind of reading this, an 8th grade reading level is considered accessible for about 85% of the general public. So I don't know what an 8th grade reading level looks like or how to necessarily get there or differentiate that, but it kind of just also speaks to making sure you're not going over someone's head or, not in line with what the real audience might be able to receive in a way that you're really trying to get to for them. So yeah, I think that question was pretty much addressed already. Here's another one. How do accessible emails impact email deliverability and spam filters?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
The dreaded spam filters. So I would say accessible emails typically have cleaner code, which helps improve readability, which can obviously then enhance deliverability. So ensuring like alt text, semantic structure, a well-informed HTML also reduces the likelihood of that email being flagged as spam. So that's kind of how accessibility will kind of impact those emails when it does come to an ESP kind of flagging you as spam as your emails coming into their system.
Awesome. All right. I think we've got kind of one more. I think I have a quick answer to this one, but how do we measure the ROI of accessibility improvements in email campaigns? I'm assuming we need to do some testing there, but Jen, I'll let you elaborate on your thoughts on that. Measuring the ROI.
Yeah, that's
implementing. Yeah.
Exactly. ROI is always going to be important. Like any company, anything you work on, they're going to say, what's the ROI on that? So yeah, there is ROI associated with accessibility improvements. So how do you go about that? So you're going to want to kind of track your pre and post accessibility campaign performance. So you're going to want to kind of know what it was like before you applied the accessibility items, and then what it's like after those have been applied. You're going to want to track the open rates, the click-through rates, the engagement time, and the unsubscribes. You're going to then want to take this and overlay this with feedback from screen reader users, as well as any kind of A/B tests between accessible versus non-accessible designs. So you're always going to want to make sure to test it out so that you can say, hey, by doing this, obviously we're compliant. It also improved on this.
Perfect. Yeah, test, test, test. Yeah, I think that's it. We'll jump to the next slide because there's some nice information there, but we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. If any more questions trickle in, I'll jot them down. We can reply separately. But yeah, we've just seen how ensuring this digital accessibility really isn't just about being legally compliant. We're trying to have a commitment to inclusivity that can benefit people with disabilities. So beyond that positive impact, we also have those cases involving the companies like Netflix, Walmart, Harvard, that just show even minor accessibility gaps can be costly. So we hope that today's helped inspire you on the best ways to align your digital content using those WCAG standards, protecting your brand, improving your bottom line, and really just making everyone's online experiences optimal. And what we have here is an email address you can use to request an accessibility compliance checklist. This is a screenshot of some of those checklist items or considerations. A lot of the ones Jen went over in her portion of the presentation. And so we'd love to have that be a great asset for you to get you on your way with email accessibility compliance. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. And we do hope to see you next time.